So, how you guys doing? Yeah, pretty rowdy crowd. That's good. That's good. It's been an interesting week. This is the end of a long week for me. I've been on the road quite a bit, and I did presentations Monday night in Louisville, and then in Florence on Tuesday, and on Elizabethtown on Tuesday, Florence on Wednesday, and Lexington yesterday. And so that's all been good stuff. But I really would tell you that I think probably what the group I'm talking to today is probably the most important group I'll talk to all week. Because see, you folks are in the very significant position with respect to what matters to us in terms of being able to touch the lives of our students on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so it's true. I retired from Corvette a year ago, and you might say to yourself, what kind of idiot would retire from the coolest job on the planet? You guys had a chance to tour Corvette yesterday, right? Ed came and talked to you yesterday a little bit. Ed's a great friend of mine, and was a real valuable part of the team at Corvette when I was there. But the Corvette plant had been my 13th GM location in 3 countries on 2 continents. And so I had been around the world with General Motors and had done manufacturing my whole life. And it was really, I often say that the other 12 locations were just on my way to get to Kentucky. My wife and I and my daughter fell in love with Southern Kentucky. We have a little horse farm out in Rockfield, so it was our desire that and I had said this all along as I got to Corvette, that I really wanted to retire from that job. I would have preferred to have a few more years at it, but I really didn't want to move again. You know, I mean, obviously, 13 different locations. I'd moved my family enough times. I was kind of done with that. But I had achieved, significant success with General Motors. I mean, we had launched the brand new Corvette Stingray. It was named as North American Car of the Year. In fact, that was really one of the things that led to my decision. That was in January of 14 that we were named as North American Car of the Year, and I had the great privilege to be in Detroit with our chief engineer, and we received the award on behalf of the hundreds of people, thousands of people that had worked to design, develop, validate, and build that iconic new American sports car. And so I was actually, and GM had already started talking to me about my next assignment. I had spent my career going around and fixing things for General Motors in different places around the world, and GM had already started talking about where my next assignment was going to be. And I began to think, man, I'm not sure. And I kind of looked at the finances and stuff, and I said, so I was watching the Super Bowl in February of 2014, and it was when the Seahawks were playing the Denver Broncos. And if those of you who follow NFL, the Denver Broncos, they kept flashing on John Elway. And John Elway, of course, won 2 Super Bowls, the second of which he retired immediately after. And I thought, you know what? We just won Car of the Year. And I think that's kind of like my Super Bowl. And so I think I'm going to retire. So the reality was that I chose to retire. That kind of sent a bit of a shockwave across the Corvette world because, I hadn't talked to anybody about that. I literally went into work on the Tuesday morning after the Super Bowl. My boss was coming down from Detroit to talk about where I was going to go next. And I said, I don't think so. I'm going to retire. But what? So I had achieved success with General Motors, and it was I loved every minute of work for the company. Very difficult times. I mean, we went through a bankruptcy, and I had to close my home plant during that period of time up in Michigan. It was, it was an emotional ride, but I've been very, very satisfied with my 34 years there. But I was really looking to what I was going to do next and how that success would look like, what success would look like, and I wanted it to be on a larger scale. I was in a position to affect the income or the revenue stream of the company and work on our profits and all those kinds of things. And that was really important in the sort of the capitalistic, bureaucratic kind of way. But I was looking to do it more on a social basis. And so shortly after I retired, I got a phone call from a guy named Larry Hayes. You may know Larry. He's the secretary for the Economic Development Cabinet here in the Commonwealth. And he's a friend of mine from back in days at Corvette and doing things together. And Larry called me up and he said, hey, congratulations on your retirement. I said, thanks. He says, well, so now what are you going to do? And I said, I'm done work for General Motors, but I don't think I'm done working. He says, well, I got this idea. He said, the governor and I have been talking about this thing for a long time. He says, we think that Kentucky ought to have an automotive industry association. He says, every other automotive state in the country has one, and we don't. We don't want it to be a government bureaucratic type of agency. What we really need is an industry leader to run the thing. He said, you interested? I said, oh man, Larry. I said, I don't know. And then I began to think about the context of achieving success on a bit of a larger scale. And so, a long story short, I ended up being the executive director of the Kentucky Automotive Industry Association. Along the way, I had some dialogue with Western Kentucky University. They'd asked, I'd always said that I kind of wanted to work at Western. I love to be in the classroom. I love talking to students. I love being a part of that whole career search kind of thing. And so I also simultaneously accepted a position with Western Kentucky University, where I serve as Associate Vice President for Advanced Manufacturing, working on connecting industry with the assets of the university. So my office is at the Research Center down on Campbell Lane and Nashville Road. And I spend a little bit of my time with the Western opportunity and a lot of my time with the Auto Association. So I joke often that I failed retirement. I went from having one job to having two. But it's great. I really do love it. I love the flexibility that I enjoy today and doing that kind of work. But the opportunity to come out and talk to folks like you is what really excites me, because we have. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the automotive industry. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, but there's just some data that I think you ought to be aware of. As we talk about careers in the STEM disciplines, there is a huge amount of opportunity in manufacturing in general and automotive manufacturing specifically, right here in the Commonwealth. One of the things that's very unique about our students, the students that you all spend time in the classroom every day, is that many of them want to work where they grew up. Now that's a little different than some of the other places I've lived in this world, and people want to get out, but that was a phenomenon that became very clear to me when I got to Corvette. And at General Motors, you kind of make career progression by moving around. That's sort of what you have to do. And I had a whole plant full of people that wanted to be the next general manager, but didn't want to leave Bowling Green. Well, there's only so many of those jobs you can do, and so. But the more time I spent here, obviously, the more I understood about it. I mean, heck, I retired so I could stay here, so I understand that phenomenon. So if we look at that as a strength as opposed to a weakness, then we are blessed because we have a lot of jobs in this region. In fact, our data, the research that we've done, I sit on the board for the Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Authority for the region. The research we've done would suggest that we are going to have 4,500 manufacturing jobs open in this region by 2016. That number swells to 9,000 by 2020. Now that's real jobs, and those are good, high-paying jobs with good benefits and good retirement plans, et cetera, in many, many cases. And those are opportunities for our students, for the students that you touch their lives every day, the opportunities for them to stay and work and have a significant career right here in South Central Kentucky. So I think that the encouragement that I would offer to all of you is that you are engaged in the work that could result in careers for students. Now, I would never take anything away from the arts or from healthcare or any of the other industries, but by and large, the STEM disciplines that you all are a part of are the disciplines that lead to students to make choices to come into manufacturing. And let me assure you that the manufacturing jobs that we have are far greater than just a plant manager. I mean, we have a huge number of entry-level jobs available for production operators and skilled maintenance technicians, process technicians, quality control analysts, all kinds of those things. And so many of those don't take anything more than a high school degree. Now, as we get them into our plants and our operations, we may send them back to Sky CTC or other type of schools for further education or bring them in to teach. But there's also an incredible number of opportunities for them to go through 2-year programs in a school like this, 2+2 programs to move into WKU or U of L or UK and get a degree in anything, business to engineering to math or whatever, that all have the opportunity to come back in and work inside of our industry. So the opportunities that exist in manufacturing are significant, and I think the significance of that to you all is that you are educating students in a world in which there will be jobs. Okay, we have a significant student debt problem in this country, and I know I'm talking to the choir here. You guys get that. We have a $4 trillion student debt problem in this country. Now, if a student is able to, say, for instance, work and go to school at the same time, we've talked about a program like that, guess what? They don't have that kind of debt problem. If they can come out of college and get a good job that pays well, they can start to resolve some of that debt issue, okay? So I think that, and I often make the sort of joking analogy, it does us no good at all to educate 2,000 underwater basket weavers a year if we've only got 500 underwater basket weaving jobs, right? So I think it has a huge value in this world for us to educate students in the disciplines in which we have work. Now again, that could be healthcare, that could be, you know, whatever else is, but I'm telling you that in manufacturing, we've got a lot of opportunity. So let me share with you some data, some statistics around why I believe that to be true. The first thing is that, okay, I'll do it here. Let me just tell you a little about the Kentucky Automotive Industry Association. As I said, Governor Beshear chartered it a year ago in April at a press conference. I had retired the month before. He didn't announce that I was taking over just then, but it came very shortly thereafter. But the mission of KAIA is to really advance and promote our automotive industry. As I said, most of our peer states, and you know, we're competing with the South Carolinas, the Georgias, the Mississippis, Alabamas, et cetera. So our mission is to advance and promote Kentucky's automotive industry and the environment that we have for that by really fundamentally providing a common voice to that industry. So that we were, you know, we were a collection of a number of companies. I think you'll be surprised when I tell you how big it is, but a collection of a number of companies, all of whom had, you know, maybe some voice with the government or with the legislature or with environmental authorities or whatever else it was. Educational systems is a huge factor. You know, so everybody's kind of doing their own thing, but we really didn't have a collective common way of speaking to that. So that's why he wanted to form it. So we're an industry-led organization. I've got a board of directors that is composed of the 3 OEMs in the state, Toyota, GM, and Ford, of course. Then we've got 9 of our major suppliers in the state that are part of this. But it really is an industry-led organization. We are not a government agency. We are actually a 501c3, and you are looking at the entire payroll of KIA. I'm the only employee, so I get to do a lot of this kind of stuff. This is our board. You'll recognize many of those companies. You know, Sumitomo from right here in Bowling Green, with a plant down in Scottsville, plant up in Edmonton. I've mentioned Toyota, GM, and Ford, Akebono, ZF, et cetera. So significant industrial support for what we're doing here. But the objectives of the Kentucky Automotive Industry Association are really fourfold. The first is branding. You know, Kentucky is the 3rd largest state in the country with respect to automotive production, but no one knows it, and we don't act like it. And so we really need to brand the industry as an automotive, need to brand the state as an automotive industry. And interestingly, the automotive industry contributes over $14 billion a year to the gross state product, okay? That's bigger than bourbon, bigger than horses, bigger than coal, bigger than tourism, bigger than almost every other segment of the economy. So I would argue that our new signature industry in Kentucky, while I love horses and I love bourbon, I would say that automotive is a signature industry. So branding is a big deal. Advocacy, how do we bring that common voice to who we are and what we do in the state? So there, you know, every company's got its sort of own set of issues, naturally, but there are many issues that we face commonly that we can work on as an association. We're an industry leader. We need to stand up. In terms of our leadership position, we need to be counted on in terms of providing a perspective to legislators or to the media or to others about who we are and what we do. But the thing that is the most significant issue that we face, and the one that I love talking to groups like this about, is workforce. The fact is that we do not have a pipeline to sustain the kind of openings that we have in the automotive industry and in manufacturing in general in the state of Kentucky. Now, that doesn't mean that other states do. We all have a problem with this. Everywhere we have a significant manufacturing base. We've raised 2 generations of Americans who think that manufacturing is dirty, dark, and dangerous. Now, you all had a chance to see Corvette yesterday. You know, it's not dirty, dark, and dangerous. In fact, I would argue that you know, when we rehabbed that whole plant during the course of my time, you could almost eat off the floors in there. Every job is ergonomically designed to be within the constraints of what is the capacity of even the 5th percentile female. We work, or 5th percentile male for that matter. We work hard to make sure that the environment is good. The air is cleaner in the Corvette plant than it is outside on the street. Okay, so those kinds of things exist in virtually every manufacturing operation throughout the Commonwealth and really in a lot of different places. So they are not dirty, dark, and dangerous, but we do have to convince our young folks today that it's a good place to be. You know, I often say that we'll win this battle for the hearts and minds of our students to come into manufacturing in the living rooms of middle school parents, because you know, you know, you all over parents, you know how much we can influence our decisions, our children's decisions, not necessarily by our words. We all know that's a wasted words bucket sometimes, but certainly their choices in terms of what their opportunities are. You know, what are the kinds of things they could be doing in this world. So let me give you some facts about the Kentucky automotive industry in general. Did you realize that 2/3 of the counties in the state of Kentucky have an automotive manufacturing footprint? 80 of our counties have at least one manufacturing plant in them associated with the automotive industry. Now, if you look at this map doesn't quite show up in contrast as much, but the gray counties are the counties that do not have automotive industry. Now, it's probably no surprise to you that the bulk of it lies between I-75 and I-65. If you spend any time on I-65 lately, me and 10,000 of my closest trucking buddies are hauling freight for the automotive industry. But interestingly to that comment, if you look at those counties that are in gray, the counties that do not have an automotive footprint, and if I overlaid the interstate highway system and the parkway system on this, you'd say, I know why. I mean, we've got to have access to freeways. But here, say again?
Can you see the mountain range?
Sure, yeah. And you also know there's no interstate highways that pass through this, right? Now, that's why it sort of makes the argument for the Mountain Parkway, right? Because Mountain Parkway goes out to Beckley, West Virginia, and gives us major access to those counties. Anyway, I don't want to get into transportation debate, but the reality is that we here in South Central Kentucky are blessed with a huge amount of opportunities that exist with respect to that. And it's true in a lot of regions of the state. I mean, I ticked off the number of places I've been talking this week. Next week I'm going over to Somerset, I'm up to Henderson, all of which have the opportunities that we talk about here to move our young folks into careers in manufacturing, because these just aren't jobs. I mean, these are careers no matter what position you hold in the company, they're careers. In terms of the numbers, we exported more than $5 billion of Kentucky-made vehicles in parts last year. If you took our total automotive production, I mentioned earlier we're the 3rd largest state in the country with respect to automotive. That puts us behind only Michigan and Ohio. But if you take our automotive production over our population, we're the 1st by far per capita. We make more cars per resident of the state of Kentucky than any other state in the country. We had $4.5 billion total just out of the automotive industry. The $14 billion that I spoke of earlier is really the total indirect and induced effects as well. There are almost 470 automotive-related manufacturing facilities in the state of Kentucky in those 80 counties, employing 86,000 people directly. That's a big factor in our favor if you think about automotive in the Commonwealth. So the other thing that's happened is that the automotive industry is a very cyclical industry. I mean, there are very high highs and very low lows, and we happen to be in a very good period of time right now for the automotive industry, and the industry has grown quite a bit, and we see that in our own data here in Kentucky. In fact, over the last 5 years, we've announced over 335 new business expansions or new business locations here in the Commonwealth. That's over $4.5 billion of capital investment being made in the state related exclusively to automotive manufacturing, and that represents about 20,000 new jobs. Now, it wasn't that much, it was just a few weeks ago, you may have seen the news that Volvo made a decision to locate a major assembly plant. They were going to put it in North America, and they decided to put it in South Carolina. Now, people in Kentucky, some people in Kentucky were wringing their hands saying, oh my gosh, we lost an OEM, we should have had it. Well, we're in the discussion process with Volvo. But the reality was that a major new assembly plant is going to take about 4,000 employees. And we don't have 4,000 employees waiting at the door to put into work there. Now, we're much better off solving this problem. We've got plenty of jobs. And it's a lot easier for us to solve this problem for Sumitomo to pick up 60 people and BG Metal Forming to pick up 110. And that's the way we'll solve that problem. And there's a lot of solutions out there to these issues. But I would tell you that we did not throw nearly the amount of money to try to get an OEM as other states had to do. And that's your taxpayer money that we would be giving away to get them to come here. So, we'd certainly be arguing the other way if all was ever coming to Kentucky. But in reality, we weren't willing to do from a state standpoint to give away as much as maybe some of our peer states were, because our workforce problem, we believe, says take care of who's here first and who's growing here, and help that out. Now, we do have an interesting situation here as the aluminum industry in the Commonwealth continues to grow, and certainly the largest capital investment announced last year in the state of Kentucky, we could walk to it right now. It's Constellium right over here in the Trans Park, and it's a major aluminum processor for the vehicle industry, as we move more to lightweighting. But all that notwithstanding, I think the argument is clear that the automotive industry in Kentucky is a pretty big deal. Quick look at the industry overview. This chart represents, this is here where we are in 2015. But this, as I said, it's a cyclical industry, but we happen to be in a very, very good global growth stage. Maybe domestically, it's not quite as growth oriented, although it does continue. This is North American, does continue up to about 18 million vehicles. But the global industry appears that we think it's going to peak out at around 118, 120 million vehicles. And because Kentucky's a player in the global industry, we get to take advantage of both of those growth curves. What does that mean for us in this room? It means jobs. It means continued jobs. The other interesting phenomenon that we have here in Kentucky that's somewhat problematic is that the age of the automotive industry in the state is about 30 or 35 years. Toyota got here in 1980, 81. GM got the plant from Chrysler in 1979, started producing cars here in 81. The average span of a career path in automotive is 30 to 35 years. So guess what? Not only are we expanding and growing, we're also having people retire. So we have an attrition thing that we've got to deal with as well. So the opportunities are great, and I would never. This is an interesting phenomenon too. Over 50% of the North American automotive output was south of Ohio last year. It wasn't that many years ago that only 20%, actually in 2006, only 20% of North American vehicles were built south of Ohio. Everything was in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Ontario, etc. Now Mexico is obviously a formidable factor, but nevertheless, we've got this role here in the South and the Southeast, and Kentucky's ideally positioned in both to serve northern markets and southern markets. So what are our opportunities? This is what we continue to work on, strengthening our brand. I get to spend a fair bit of my time talking to companies that are interested in Kentucky, travel a little bit with some trade delegations, some other stuff to talk about Kentucky's environment for automotive. We want to continue to create and retain high quality jobs. You see, that's the thing, is these jobs we're talking about, they are not simple jobs. They are not, every employee in the auto industry in the state of Kentucky, and really the auto industry, is engaged in a small work team led by a full-time team leader. And that means then that we are looking for far more than just their hands. We want their hearts and their minds as well, because we're asking them to be problem solvers, collaborative team players. They've got to be able to work in an environment where they are expected to make improvements in their jobs for themselves and for the team, for the organization. So those are high quality jobs. These are not menial or mindless kinds of jobs. We want to continue to attract new capital investment. I would argue that we're doing a good job on creating jobs and attracting new capital investment. But our challenge today is this thing of a world-class workforce. We really do have a significant opportunity. I had an interesting experience about 2 months ago. I was asked to sit on a panel at a conference of post-secondary educators. So all the university and KCTCS folks, and there were 250 or so in the room. And there was 3 of us on this panel. There was a fellow from healthcare, there was a person from IT, and there was me from manufacturing. And as we described the profile for all of those educators out there, the profile of the students we're looking for, you could have interchanged IT with manufacturing and with healthcare. We're all looking for the same types. But I think it has great value for us to educate our students into disciplines and careers where there are jobs. That seems to be a pretty simple model. And so I thank you for the work that you guys do to do that. You may have heard of this. There are a lot of solution sets out there with respect to automotive, with respect to this workforce issue that we face. And there's no one right answer to any of those things. Everybody's got to be sort of playing a position. Have you heard of Kentucky FAME? Kentucky FAME is the Federation of Advanced Manufacturing Education. It has grown out of an initiative that Toyota started in Georgetown with Bluegrass Community College. Toyota decided about 9 years ago that they needed to start priming their pump for people to anticipate their retirement curve. So they partnered with Bluegrass, and Bluegrass developed a curriculum where the student would go to school, 2 days a week and go to work 3 days a week. So that cooperative educational initiative then says, not only does a student work and get paid to maintain their lifestyle and pay for the education, but they get an education at the same time. And so after 5 semesters, they would graduate with essentially a dual path. They'll have an associate's degree and an apprenticeship. So, and then naturally, the idea is that if I'm employed by Toyota and I go through my 5 semesters, then I step into a full-time job with Toyota. Now, Toyota had done that model, and Toyota's a great corporate citizen. They'd shared that with a number of companies in the Bluegrass region around Georgetown and whatnot, and they had probably about 6 or 8 companies that were participating in this thing. They were hiring 1 or 2 students a year, putting them into that cohort and moving them through the 5 semesters. I was in a discussion actually at a KAI event at the Governor's Mansion back in October of last year, and there was a group of companies from Northern Kentucky. Now, if you know much about Northern Kentucky, Florence, Covington area, there's a significant amount of automotive business, and it tends to be German in nature. Mostly around Georgetown and throughout the Commonwealth, it's Japanese owned, Sumitomo's example. But in Northern Kentucky, we had these German companies who were bonding together with the European American Chamber of Commerce out of Cincinnati area, out of Southern Ohio and Indiana, and they were getting ready to embark on a curriculum development project with a company called Festo out of Germany. They were going to develop a curriculum that would result in apprentices that would be German certified to go to work in these American-based operations in Northern Kentucky. And so I was talking to the CEO of one of the companies, and I said, well, wait a minute. I said, and they were going to pay, they're going to pay Festo about $50 million to do that. I said, well, wait a minute. I said, there's this thing down in Georgetown, and we got to talking, and that evolved into Kentucky Fame. So Kentucky Fame is now at 5 different KCTCS campuses throughout the Commonwealth. I actually have this meeting next week. When I talk to next week's group, I got to do it in the morning because I'm at a planning meeting at SkyCTC's campus in Franklin, Simpson County, talking about getting our Bowling Green chapter started. Now, we were going to get it going on not quite a year ago, and we were going to try and get a class in by January this year, and that kind of fell through because some industrial folks backed out of it. But Kentucky Fame is an example of the way that we need to work together. See, for years, industry has stood back and said, hey, educators, give us what we want. And then we went silent on it, and we didn't put any money into it, and we didn't cooperate, we didn't play in the arena that we said, you guys fix the problem. So now what we're seeing is a huge amount of the opportunities that we have, the success that we will enjoy will be where we are participating in industrial and educational collaboratives, where, for instance, y'all have a chance to go into the Corvette plant because the Corvette plant said, yes, bring the educators in. We want them to see what we do. You had a chance to go into Stuff Bridge. You got a chance to go into some of the other places you've been this week because, and admittedly, we're not asking you to do those jobs. We just want you to know they exist. And we just want you to have a feel for, I just talked a moment ago about the environment. We want you to know that it's a safe, healthy, clean place to work. It's not the fiery pits of hell, that it's actually a decent place to have a job. And so when we do those kinds of things, we think that results in a successful mutual understanding of what the issues are. Now I got to tell you that I have yet to meet the educator in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and I'm sure you guys are exactly along with this too, who doesn't want to meet the needs of what we have. You all understand that at the end of the day, our job in the educational systems is producing citizens who can be productive members of society, right? And we've got some challenges to that in the state of Kentucky. When we went to launch the new car, I don't know if Ed talked about this or not, I suspect he didn't, but when we went to launch the new car, I had a need for a substantial number of new temporary employees. And so we were going to hire about 150 new temporary employees. And so I said to our employees, we had about 750 or so at the time, I said, listen, I'm going to let every one of you submit the name of a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a neighbor's kid, whatever, that could be a temporary employee. And these were going to make $16 an hour, start, and have the chance to become full-time at General Motors. And that's a pretty big deal. And so, needless to say, I had 750 names that were submitted, and that was great. And we turned it over to a third party to begin the screening process to decide whether these students were capable of being a part of General Motors. I couldn't get 150 out of that.
Wow.
I couldn't get 150 out of it. So we actually went outside and began to solicit applications through the Kentucky Career Center and other sources to get to that 150.
Wouldn't it be neat to know what the weakness was? Out of 700, you couldn't get 150. What was the greatest area of deficit?
I can tell you.
Reading.
Drug test.
Oh, well, that's not us.
That's not us.
No, and you know what? It's hard to say when the most popular comment you make is a drug test. But Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, and I'm fond of saying that we can teach a student how to study for a welding test, we can't teach them how to study for a drug test, and that's a problem. I mean, that's a real problem in this state, and I know I'm preaching the choir on that. But really, fundamental skills. I mean, one of the things that you certainly probably witnessed yesterday is that we hire about 30 or 35 students at Corvette every year out of Western Kentucky University. And they're our tour guides, okay? We strive to put them to work in the major they have. If they're in engineering, we put them up with Ed, or if they're in finance, we put them up with Helen. If they're communication, put them in communications, but they really are our tour guides. Well, that's terrific, and it really is great career preparation for those kids. I mean, they get public speaking skills that are exceptional. They think on their feet. They do a good job.
Ours were great. Yes.
But yeah, I'm sure they were, and I could probably, I could probably tell you their names because they were very important to us. But interestingly, with some of those students, as we bring them in, we got to teach them to, get out of bed on time, get up in time to put a shave on, tuck your shirt in, and these are skills that are fundamentally missing in a lot of what we see today. So. That's not an educational problem. I mean, that's a societal problem. I'm not laying that on your doorstep, but it's all of what we do. I mean, it's a reason why Eric Keeling over here at the ATC is working on attendance policies and working on certifications as part of the criteria for graduation. Because that creates in the minds of our students, hey, no kidding, I got to get up on time. I got to be at school on time. Now, again, there's not one solution to any of this stuff, but it all plays together. So, that's kind of what I wanted to cover with you guys today. I obviously have a great deal of passion around this subject. I love what you guys do, honest to goodness. And if there's ever anything I can do to help what you do, you want to come in and talk to students, I'll be happy to do that. I have spent my time since, one of the things that's really interesting about this is that as a plant manager, I had 10,000 things on my plate every day, and that was fine. I loved it. I was born to be a plant manager. I love doing that. But you're so consumed with ensuring that the next Corvette comes off the line safely and high quality, all those kinds of things, that you really hope, there's issues that are on your list to work on, but you really never get to them, and you hope that somebody is. Workforce is one of those things. I mean, I knew, when I retired from Corvette, I had 83 skilled tradespeople, really the skilled maintenance technicians that really keep the plant running. 56 of them could walk out the same day that I left because they were eligible for retirement. And we had not done a thing about planning for that. Now, these are people who literally could bring the plant down to its knees if they weren't there, right? And not if there any maliciousness. It's just that they're so skilled. And we had not done one thing about preparing the plant for that. And so, as a plant manager, as I say, you hope that someone's working on that. Well, now someone is, and that's me. I'm driving this thing across the entire state. I mean, that growth of the Kentucky Fame Centers is I'm pushing automotive guys in every one of those sectors to get engaged. That's why I'm going down to Sky CTC in Franklin next week, is to push manufacturers who are there to put people into that program, because that's the investment we need to make. Now, we're not going to solve the problem today for tomorrow, right? We got to start making investments today that will pay off in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years that we have the people there. The near term between here and there, I've had economic development people, throughout the state, the economic development people, I know them all and talk to them often, and I say, so what do you do to sell your region? Oh, I sell workforce. Well, you ain't got nobody. Well, yeah, no, I'm lying. Oh, wait a minute, that's not a good strategy. I mean, obviously jesting, but I mean, the point is that we don't have a pipeline to support the number of jobs that we have, and we need everybody's help to do that, and you all can play a position in that. So, thank you. So anyway, that's what I want to talk about today. Any questions about anything? I mean, I'll talk about Corvettes all you want. Talk about college football, but anything about manufacturing, automotive, or whatever.
Do you have a card we could use?
Actually, you know what I was thinking about as I walked in from my truck? Yeah, I'll get one to Brian, and we'll get the.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I normally come to these things with a whole fistful of them, and I give you all one, but I had about 4 of the meetings before I got here today, so I forgot them.
As far as the Kentucky Fame goes, so let's say that it got up and running at Sky CTC. I know it started off as a model with Toyota, but you're saying that these kids would not go necessarily to Toyota. They'd be
heavens
here
no.
for just wherever.
They'll go to Harman. They'll go to Corvette. They'll go to BG Metal Forming. They'll go to Trace Diecast. No, I mean that's the whole point. Is we want to do this in each one of these regions where local companies are engaged by they're sponsoring students. Now, the university, the KCTCS school will identify, by going to high school auditoriums or whatever, and identify a population of students, and then it's kind of fun to watch. It's happening up in E-Town right now. The companies all fight over the students, try to get that. And then, once they get their students, and those students will proceed through the program as a cohort, right? So they'll go through all 5 semesters, and there'll be some fallout, that happens. But they'll proceed through, and then, right after that semester's over, we'll start another cohort through and continue to do that. We have companies who are committed to, 2 students a year for every year for ongoing, and 2 isn't a great number, but that's 2 more students that we didn't have before.
So the company then is committed to paying for, I mean, the student has nothing to worry about, but just making sure they show up and have an
Yes.
attitude and all that.
Yes. There is a little bit of variation. Some companies, so here's an example of how we in industry gotta collaborate. In industry, I've hired hundreds of people across my career, and I've hired them to work 40 hours a week inside a GM factory, because that's what my expectation is, or 40 plus overtime, right? Well, we gotta get our heads around the fact that we're hiring somebody who's only gonna be here 3 days a week for the first 5 semesters. And that's a different paradigm for us. So that's just not who we're used to. Well, once we get our heads around that, because we say, oh my gosh, because in 5 semesters, which is no time at all in the corporate life cycle of things, you say, I've got a skilled maintenance technician who's gonna come out. And oh, by the way, I can look for strengths and weaknesses in the people skills and the other kinds of things as we interview and select these students for these programs. So it's not just who wants to be the next, air or hydraulic or, pneumatic or whatever kind of technician. What is it that they, what do they bring to the party? So there is variation how companies do that, because treat them as a full-time employee, we'll only pay them for the work they do. They can use that money, but we'll pay them enough that they can cover their expenses and whatnot. Some companies have tuition refund programs, so they'll pay for their education. I think at the end of the day, I'm okay with that variation, because it means that whatever the company does, it's 1 more student into the program. I mean, initially I said, oh my gosh, no, we've got to all do it exactly the same, or because we're offering unfair benefits. Well, guess what? The world ain't fair. So that's okay, I mean, if I get interviewed and I get selected by a company that pays me tuition refund, great. It's like getting a lotto. If I get, selected and chosen by a company that doesn't, but I got a job, I hit the lotto.
Yeah.
So Kentucky Fame's and again, that's only one part of what we're trying to do throughout the Commonwealth to make these things happen. I had a chance, the local junior achievement does this thing called the Student Success Summit. You guys know about this? I can't remember when it was, last fall, I guess. They had 900 kids at SkyPack, and I had a chance to go talk to them, kind of the same way that I'm talking to you all. A little different context, because they were the students and not the teachers, but 900 students talking about the opportunities that exist for these kinds of things. We are working now, I was with a delegation that went to Florida last year. It was part of the chamber, and we looked at a number of things. There's this thing we saw in Alabama called Worlds of Opportunity. Do you know about this?
I do,
Yeah, unbelievable. They put 13,000 8th graders through this conference in 2 days. They set up about 14 or 15 different fields of work: construction, healthcare, law enforcement, manufacturing, auto repair, all these kind of 14 or so different fields of work in a huge convention center in downtown Mobile, Alabama. And they brought these students in busloads at a time, and they had 2 hours to get through all of those opportunities of interest to them. And they had, as you would with kids, they had a passport. And if you got stamped 5 times, that means you met with 5 different industries, then you were in the running for an iPad or something like that. But the idea was 13,000 students at the 8th grade year had a chance to go see what a career might look like in that field. We're gonna do that in Bowling Green. I mean, we're all fired up about that. We're gonna do that here, and we've already started the plan for that. I think we're gonna do it in November this year. So, and we'll do it obviously with all of our county schools and all of our city schools. So that's a big deal. I mean, and again, there's no one answer to this. It's all of the above. It's everything. Anything we do to convince students that getting educated in the disciplines in which we have jobs is a good strategy. Glad all 3 of my kids got jobs. That's what makes me happy.
You don't need to be a psychology major working in something totally unrelated.
Yeah,
You
right,
want-
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I talk
You don't
about
want that waste.
that's why I talk about underwater basketball, but I don't make anybody bad. Unless there's underwater basketball majors here, I don't know.
That's the thing, we have so many people coming out of college right now, not having job openings in what they have been trained to do.
That's exactly my point. And
Yeah.
when I joke about that, but the reality
Yeah.
is, we have told all of our young folks for years that the only path to success was a 4-year degree.
Right.
And that's been true for a lot of us, right? I mean, that's how we define our lives. But the reality is that A, it's very expensive to do that, and there's a huge student debt problem. And B, maybe college isn't the right answer for everybody. Because there's plenty of jobs out there that don't require a 4-year degree. And I represent thousands of them. So, other questions or comments?
I think the other, sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
What
ma'am?
has been the biggest roadblock you have faced with your message? I guess what I'm getting at is how receptive has the education community been? And I don't mean the schools, I mean maybe even at the state level.
Yeah, they're very receptive because, one of the reasons the governor wanted this organization to be industry-led is because I speak with some level of credibility. I've done this for 34 years. And that's not intended to be boastful, I'm just talking about, it's not just another educator talking about another bureaucrat from the government. The hurdle that we face is getting sort of the arrows aligned on how do we fund these kinds of things. There's no question in this state, we have not done a good job with higher education. We are one of the 3 states in the country that have reduced higher education funding over the last 3 years. Now, again, we just talked about that higher education isn't necessarily the answer to that, but that's education that funds CTC too, and all the other KCTCS schools. I'm not just talking about, Western or UK or something. And a society, a government, a person is defined about in terms of how they spend the money, right? So what is it that we value? And if we value the jobs and the education, in fact, this presentation is a subset. I had the chance to testify, to speak to committees in both both houses of the General Assembly earlier this year about the subject, to kind of tune them up to say, look, next year's a budget year. We got to be really serious about how we fund these kinds of things. For instance, any of you guys know Jeff Arbuckle or Greg Arbuckle at Western? He runs their manufacturing sciences and architectural program. And I met with Greg to talk to him about some of the things, some of the hurdles he faces. And my curiosity was, how come, your students are really well qualified to do the work that we exist in our plants? Supervisors, managers, those kind of jobs. I said, how come it's not, do you have trouble finding employers to hire your students? He said, Dave, every student I graduate is hired. I said, they've got a job. I said, well, okay, great, then it's a throughput problem. I'm a manufacturer guy, let's solve the throughput problem. He said, well, I said, what would it take to create more of them? If you graduate 80 this year, what would it take to graduate 100 next year? He said, finances, resources. I can't, I'm faculty. I can't, we're already stretched to the max. We can't. So if we want to produce people to do the work that we have available, we've got to fund it that way. There's other debates that we talk about. For instance, as you may know, the University of Louisville Speed School, their School of Engineering, U of L, requires 3 co-op terms during the course of their engineering degree. Those are incredibly valuable. I will tell you today that I stand here today as a 34-year GM veteran because I co-op with General Motors when I was in college. I worked for them for 3 terms, and all of a sudden, when I was getting all these job offers, I kept comparing to what was offered to me at General Motors. Well, I went to GM. 34 years later, I retired as a plant manager. So, again, this idea, this notion of education and industrial collaboratives. Well, you know what? Those 3 co-op terms at the speed school don't happen because they just fall out of the sky. Someone is working really hard to maintain the relationships between industry and education to create those kinds of co-op experiences. We've had discussion about, and this is a co-op example as well. We've had discussions about requiring work terms for students in our KCTCS programs. Many of them already are, but in our 4-year institutions. We've had discussions about, right here in Bowling Green in Warren County, Leader in Me. What an incredible thing that this is doing. You guys are better attest to that than I am, but it's a pretty impressive thing. And we have a leg up on most of our other regions because we're raising kids up who, look you in the eye and shake your hand and tell you their name, and they can speak in front of a group of people. All the kind of skills that we find lacking, they're learning in elementary school. That's incredible. Project Lead the Way is another example of trying to get students interested in STEM disciplines. Another great initiative going on. So, but like most things, it comes back down to finances, and That's what I, so I get to use opportunities like this where I talk and hear from people like you to then go and represent those viewpoints to the legislature, to the governor, and to others. But what I do know is if I'm not doing it for the automotive industry, I'm not sure who is.
How does the school get connected with something like Project Lead the Way?
How's what?
How does the school get connected with something like Project Lead the Way?
Well, there's a national, or a statewide coordinator for Project Lead the Way who's about as passionate about this stuff as I am. And he actually works for UK. I've seen him all over the state working. And we just announced this huge initiative with Project Lead the Way in eastern Kentucky. All those states that are, or all those counties that show up in gray because they don't have any business in them. I think it's a big enabler. I had conversations yesterday with people from Richmond, Kentucky about how do we get leader in me over in our region because we hear such good things about Bowling Green. I said, well, that's, it's you are how you spend your money. And if you want to go and do something like that, you got to spend your money that way. So, and I believe me, no one gets this world of scarce resources better than I do. I ran factories all over the world for General Motors. I know how scarce resources can affect your decision process, but I just, I'm a product of sticking our head in the sand for years and hoping that, somebody else is fixing the problems. Now, it was a little bit weird, GM, because things had gone, Brian, I used up way more than my 30 minutes you were talking about.
You're welcome to talk as long as you need to, Dave.
Okay, I will make sure that, well, Brian has my contact stuff, but I'll make sure that you guys have it. And honestly, to the limits of my schedule, I'll go anywhere, anytime, talk to groups of people, and especially about topics like workforce, because it really does matter. It really does matter. Okay, thanks, you guys.
Can I ask you one